This is every #1 comic DC has put out in the last year, at least so far. Let's see how we got here. Rewind to a few months ago where we got an announcement. The DC movie Extended Universe was about to be rebooted. Good news for some, after all the new guy in charge made one out of the 3 half-decent films in the existing universe. And we still had 4 movies to come out, which I was actually excited to see. They appeared better than the stuff Marvel was cranking out at least. And first on that slate was Shazam, Fury of the Gods, which the Captain being one of my favourite heroes, not disregarding his first film, which I did quite like, probably one of the best out of DCU, is extremely flawed and adapts the darker version of the character, which I'm not overly fond of, and an ending that leaves a lot to be desired. But personally, I still like it. 5 out of 10. I walked into the theatre only to walk out content, until I put away my bias and thinking it was just okay. Or at least not as bad as I thought it was based on the trailers. However, it was bad. Looking at the reviews, I couldn't help but agree. I was less disappointed. However, I found out that Shazam was getting a brand new comic in May, and I thought I might as well try it out. Only to discover DC was having a whole new initiative to bring in new readers, called The Dawn of DC, with new runs for a multitude of heroes. So with a soft reboot starting right now, a bunch of #1s on the way, and a run featuring one of my favourite heroes, I thought I'd try to get into comics. And it has been one of the most frustrating endeavours I've ever undertaken. For some context, I've never read a comic before. It just never really appealed to me. So my knowledge and experience with these IPs have mainly come from the cartoons, movies, and TV shows. The following was my personal experience, and I know it isn't the same for everyone, but with that being said, let's begin. The first roadblock on my journey was my local comic shop, as it was only open once per week every Saturday. An annoyance to be sure, but nevertheless, I visited the store intending to buy the new Superman run and Doom Patrol, but when I asked about them, the guys working there had no clue what I was talking about. No clue about their new initiative at all. They had to check their phones to see if I was lying or not. And when we got that sorted, I found out that they only had enough stock for pre-orders, meaning the brand new runs designed for new readers to jump on only had enough for the existing customer base. And I was apparently too late to pre-order the new Shazam, as well as despite it being a month away. It was the end of March, by the way. But that was just one store. I should be able to get the rest online. And yeah, a week later I looked online and I was able to get Doom Patrol. However, Superman #1 wasn't available, despite it being only like a month old. Issues 1 and 2 were out of stock, or just retired. I don't know, because the information I got was like privy to the product available. So if I wanted them, I'd have to get them second hand. That's fine, it just came out to be a bit more than I was expected. 3 times the retail price for #1 and twice for the second issue. And I caved, as you can see. In the end, I was able to get my comics on an online store, they being Doom Patrol 1 and 2, Shazam #1, as well as Superman #3, for the appropriate price. Even with an issue of the site, refusing my card for God knows what reason, several times. Well, this is just the start of my most recent complaints. But this is just a start. Most of these complaints are just storefront and business annoyances. They're still the overwhelming stupidity of the company and industry that I have yet to get to. And are these comics even good to begin with? After that mess, the idea for this video first sprung to mind. I decided to buy all the #1s of the upcoming DC titles to give them a proper chance, only for the problems to start piling up. To begin with, how many books do you think are running at this part of this initiative? 4? Maybe 5? 7 or 8? Well, you'd be wrong. It's 12. I mean, it's only 12 so far into the year. Only if you include new runs for existing heroes. The list being Green Arrow, John Kent, Superboy, Man of Tomorrow, Superman, Doom Patrol, Shazam, Green Lantern, Titans, Cyborg, Hawkgirl, Steelworks, and Batman Brave and the Bold, Mabey. As the Dawn of DC branding is plastered on almost every book they have ongoing, including Batman, Action Comics, Catwoman, Flash, and brand new IPs such as City Boy and Spirit World. Basically, every other book being released. So, for new readers, it feels like an illusion of accessibility, and Superman #1 and Action Comics 1050 does not seem like they fit together. And you know what doesn't help? The lack of explanation of how the Dawn of DC works. There is like nothing but a few posts if you search for it, but is there a reading order? Are they separate, or do they all connect? I assume it's the latter. The branding seems like they will just come together in the future. But how can you have over 20 titles coming out a month and expect everyone to keep up? Not to mention the latest event, Night Terrors, confuses everything further, as for 2 months, a ton of 2-part books come out for a myriad of characters that interrupt current runs, but also include heroes that don't have ongoing series. To put this simply, Shazam #1 released in May, and #2 in June, but in July and August, we have Shazam Night Terrors 1 and 2. Then in September, we go back to Shazam #3. So do we need to read Night Terrors between 2 and 3, or can it just be ignored? Here's a thought, have Night Terrors 1 and 2 become Shazam 3 and 4 with a Night Terror subheading, like this. Then 3 becomes 5, and it makes things a lot simpler. Earlier this year, they only had a few new runs start a month, like 1 or 2, but in May they had 5. From February to April, you had Superman, John Kent, Superboy, Doom Patrol, and Green Arrow. But in May alone, you had Shazam, Green Lantern, Titan, Cyborg, and Batman Brave and the Bold. Not to mention the ongoing comics, as well as the newcomers like City Boy and Spirit World, with even more to come. With some of these miniseries, they still overlap, and I think over 20 books in May alone. How can DC or any company expect their customers to just jump on as new readers and keep up with this much content? It's just maddening. This is every #1 comic DC has put out in a year so far, and this is one issue of Weekly Shonen Jump. Comparisons between Western comics and manga are a dime a dozen, but the point I want to make is the volume between the two. There are about 15 to 20 series running Weekly Shonen Jump. DC has about the same on a monthly basis. I spent about $50 getting all of the Dawn of DC #1s, the first issues at least. And one issue of Shonen Jump costs about 300 yen in Japan. That's $2. Granted, it's all black and white and the paper quality is poor, but having that much content for such a low price, the value speaks for itself. And the cutthroat nature of Jump makes it so any series that doesn't perform gets axed, which is a double-edged sword because there are stories that take a little while to find a footing. But on the other hand, the stuff that doesn't sell are rejected, and the magazine reacts to the fans and what they want to read. In that kind of arrangement, I don't think we would have 3 Superman series running at the same time, especially if they don't actually have Superman in them. Imagine this. DC cuts down to about 15 runs per month. They sell single issues as normal, with like 4 alt covers or how many they want to do. But they release DC monthly, and it contains every upcoming release that would be out that month. Let's say $20, so whales can get all the alt covers to every series that they want. But for a casual reader or a newcomer, when they come in and to like any comic shop and they ask, "What's going on? What can I read?" we just say, "Here's everything that came out this month. Number ones, existing titles, everything." And to save money, they can have it in black and white, just like manga, and the single issues can be in color. Just make it simple. We should be able to buy the last year of a comic series, not just the last few issues. It just makes it a much more accessible for new readers if they can buy whatever series of Batman that's on its 15th issue, but still be able to buy number 1, or at least the base cover, or have every comic run available, or at least every issue available until a volume is released. I haven't even seen if these stories are any good yet. Shazam number 1 was the first comic of this new initiative I read, and I was impressed. It starts off with a cold open of one of Billy's adventures, rescuing a lost young scientist space T-Rex. But this also acts as a refresher to the character because we got an explanation to the characters throughout its entire history throughout the New 52. In the form of narration, but this continues throughout the entire comic, until the last few pages. I know I'm complaining about basic introductions, and this is necessary for new readers, but it's just telling, not showing. 75% of the issue, not mentioning about 40% of the pages, are just ads. A new comic had ads, but I didn't realise it was this bad. And instead, no, the math doesn't work out. I mean, 75% of the story is recap and 40% is pages of ads. It's just a base complaint. My last issue is small. Just that some of the dialogue is a bit off. And things I like. The art is nice, and the panel layout is good. I can tell what's going on. There's only one page that I had to slow down for. And the story that was actually there in the 5 pages that actually continued its plot was interesting. I like how the power isn't spread across the kids like it is in the previous version of the character and the movies. I feel like it was a big mistake when it comes to the adaptation. And the idea of Billy having to contend with the gods that gave him his powers is interesting stuff. Too bad it's all literally in 2 pages. 3 out of 10. Now, if you ask me how to fix this, then have 1 page with the exposition, just get it out of the way like that, cut the prologue, and have the 5 pages with the actual plot be stitched to the front of issue 2. Ironically, the second book I wrote was the first to be released back in February. Superman number 1 fixes a lot of issues I had with Shazam, but unfortunately suffers from almost opposite problems. First, to recap. After a brief introduction to the Man of Steel's history, we jump into a cold open with Live Wire in a battle with Superman. A bit too cold for me though. But this fight doesn't really matter, as the important thing is that, with his superheroing, he's been given advice from Lex Luthor who's in prison, acting as a devil on the shoulder. He obviously ignores him, going off to officiate a wedding Live Wire ruined. And back at the Daily Planet, we're introduced to Jimmy and Lois, who's currently the chief of the Daily Planet, as Perry White is in absence. All while Lex is still in Clark's head. Shifting focus, Lex has left his entire company to Superman, becoming Supercorp, trying to get Superman to work with him to stop some impending threat. But after a mockery of his past, Superman makes his way to talk to Lex in person. But sidetracked as the parasite is causing a ruckus. After being thrown into some trees, Superman walks over to see a gang of parasite creatures, taking him by surprise. This is much more substantial than Shazam, with more pages acting as a solid beginning for the story. Has a beginning, middle, and end. Basics for a story, which unfortunately most of the other comics couldn't really grasp. But as I alluded to before, there are a multitude of issues, different, but still present. The page layout is all over the place with wildly different formats all over the book, with some of the smaller panels getting lost in the scene. The transitions between pages, or lack thereof, is very jarring, as both when we are introduced to Live and Parasite, there's not really any build-up for the characters. The art is too detailed in my mind, as there is just more of a focus on colour and shading and spectacle than strong line work and clear page layout. I'm not really a fan of Clark's design either, but there was some stuff I liked about this book as well. The story feels well paced. There are no, or at the very least there's not many ads to interrupt the flow, which I suppose is a common occurrence with these slightly bigger books. The dialogue is what I'd expect from these characters. I feel this would make a very strong episode of a TV show, and I'd have to give Superman number 1 a 5 out of 10 overall. Green Arrow starts off strong with a simple 2-page introduction background to his character before opening with Oliver stranding on some sort of deserted island, paralleling his origin, only to be revealed that he's on some kind of alien planet. Too bad we cut to the Bean team, going about in Gotham, just investigating his disappearance. As the actual story, we follow his psychics investigating the disappearance instead of, the actual story with Oliver. And I'm like, who asked? I want a Green Arrow story in my Green Arrow book. Green Arrow stranded on an alien world sounds great, but I don't know how much of that we're going to get, as like looking forward, some of these cover arts are really cool. However, most of it I can only assume is going to be focused on the B team. It's just so much wasted potential. 2 out of 10. The art was okay. Hal Jordan is back on Earth from a story I didn't read, Space I guess, and the recap is the best so far with a Star Wars text crawl, if you could call it a crawl. The Guardians are gone, and the United Planets have taken over the Green Lantern Corps, with Hal being only one of the few lands to protest in the leadership. But most of the comic features a split focus between Hal trying to get back his normal Earth life, with adjusting to changes that occurred in his absence, and a flashback to a month previous, where he first returned to Earth as the Green Lantern. This is also an ensemble book, so we get a Jon Stewart story attached to the back, making this a truly Green Lantern book, not just one of them. Easily the best so far, at least the Hal portion. It had more time and better art than the Jordan story, I'd say. Splitting the time between Hal and the other Green Lanterns is a nice change of pace from the other books, so for the first time I feel like the pacing is not too fast and not too slow. The paneling was the simplest so far, and it just really helps the story being a lot clearer despite jumping back and forth between the present and the past. Most of the plot up is in Jon's story, as I assume it will all coalesce later on. But overall this has been the easiest read so far, if a little light on intrigue, excluding a little setup that we get just a few glimpses of. 6 out of 10. Surprisingly, I thought Doom Patrol was the most engaging book I've read at this point. We have 2, no make that 3 stories going on at the same time, with the Brain and Muller looking, or questing, for a MacGuffin, no doubt setting up for a later point in this run. The main story revolving around the new Doom Patrol debuting a new member, entering Gotham, attempting to find or rescue a rampaging metahuman, or discussing the treatment of said superpowered beings by different groups including Batman, when he shows up, I'm assuming, with Tim Drake's Robin, since Batman wants to take the villain to Arkham. The issue I have with this writing is Batman seems too passive during this argument with a Doom Patrol member called the Chief, who rants on about the injustice of metahumans by organisations like Arkham, but also Star Labs. I don't know if Star Labs is good or bad in the comics. I'm more familiar with them being good in the TV show. And to end things off, she disregards the Justice League as they wouldn't understand the hardships of metahumans, as the League is comprised of aliens, Atlanteans, Amazons, and a guy with the gadgets. She acknowledges the Flash, but says he's too fat for anyone to catch, ignoring all the Leaguers who just aren't part of the Core 7. However, she only considers humans who specifically have the metagene, but who has... What does that mean? Are all superpowered beings considered like metahumans under that umbrella? Heroes like Beast Boy, who have the metagene, are also linked to magic in some incarnations. Speaking of which, are the magical characters like Shazam or Dr. Fate not considered, even though some, like Swamp Thing, would not look out of place in a Doom Patrol? And do characters like Plastic Man, Clayface, or Poison Ivy, do they have the metagene? Even though their powers come from chemical mutation rather than a specific gene that is activated, like the X-Men, which the Doom Patrol are very similar to? Are the Flashes even metahumans? Because the Speed Force is like an extra dimensional force that species can harness across the universe, assumably in universes that don't even have the same rules as for the metagene. Especially when they can give the Speed Force to other non-speedsters. It just seems like an arbitrary designation. However, that may have just been the point. The last part of the plot is very brief, as we see Peacemaker assesses the Doom Patrol as part of a plan from the government. It will probably commence in issue 2, I assume. But despite my tirade on the metahuman designation, I have to say this is the first book I'd say is actually good. 7 out of 10. Okay, time for the lightning round. By utter coincidence, I end up reading the stronger half of the comics first. You may ask what that means. Well, every story I've covered so far, I can see merit in. At the very least, an idea for a story that may seem interesting. While if I may not like the art, direction, or execution, I can envision myself enjoying the stories in a different medium, like a movie or TV show. But the latter portion of these books can't even muster an engaging premise, or have just so little meat attached to their bones, I can't see the point. So let me speed run through these. Jon Kent and Superboy shouldn't even be books, while Superman begins a new run, and is also in the Action Comics lineup. Both of these stories mean nothing. Out of all the books I've read, I can probably remember these the least. Superboy wants to be his own person, separate from Superman, so he leaves the planet to help some alien world, but comes across an extremely unlikable, taking this disaster to just too lightly. And Jon Kent is having to deal with some interdimensional travel, and the past we need a whole first issue to explore for new readers. The worst thing about these stories is the complete irrelevancy of them. Whatever event this new slate of books is trying to lead up to, I just can't imagine how these would all coalesce together. Especially when there's much more interesting stuff happening in almost every other run. I don't know if these characters were better in the past, but from what I'm seeing, I can't really bring myself to care about them. These titles should have been axed. It's just bloating DC's releases, both 2 out of 10. Titans. Titans follows the team moving back into the Titans Tower, but have to stop an ongoing crisis ending with a threat from Peacemaker and the government. All while a mystery revolving around Wally West is unfolding around them. This one's not bad, but not great. It all rides on whether you like these characters or not. It retroactively hurts this issue because Cyborg is getting a run for himself, separate from this. And reading that, I have no clue when it takes place between the two books. I don't know if it's at the same time or before or after. But it's just another mystery which could have just been in the back issue of the Titans book. Just like John Stewart had his story in the back half of Hal Jordan's story. Titans and Cyborg, 4 out of 10 and 2 out of 10. There isn't much I can say about Steelworks. Could just been in the back of the Superman book. But I can't really rate this one as I just find it so uninteresting. Hands down, Hawkgirl is probably the worst that I've seen. Purely because it's not really about Hawkgirl and it basically shifts to be about this newish character called Galaxy. Same as Steelworks, it's just not compelling, to me at least. After all that, I have to say, I'm not really a fan of comics. Or at least not this new stuff. Perhaps the old stuff was better? Probably. Maybe I'm just wrong, and these are actually good stories that I'm simply not much of a reader. Regardless, can I do better? You have to wait and see. Nevertheless, thank you for watching. And if you want to support me, like, comment, subscribe. There's also a Patreon. If this video performs well enough, I may even come back and see what these runs are doing like in a few months when they have a more full story to tell. But in the meantime, I think I might try some manga.